Okay. Tanse, my name is Pamela. My spirit name is White Eagle Woman. I'm here to introduce this beautiful panel. And I'm just going to use my own land acknowledgement because I can't find the one that's for here. So here I go. Territorial acknowledgements are more than just about places and land. They are the recognition of the spiritual and historical responsibility that Indigenous people felt and continue to feel towards the land. They are about spaces and people. Many Indigenous people will often not only refer to our general connection to the land, but that we are born of the land and that our lives are in the land. We see the land as everything. Our connection to our ancestors, our identity, our home, our pharmacy, our library, our food source. It is a gift, not a commodity. We do not own it. We are part of its legacy. We bond not only to the land, but to each other within that land. This ideal influences how we approach the spaces we occupy and the people we connect with there within. So you're going to have 3 different people presenting today. Little CMs all over.
No.
Okay, as long as you see it too.
Yeah.
Okay, so this session invites you to be part of a collective movement towards inclusive housing solutions where lived experience is at the forefront. Join panelists to gain new tools and strategies to protect proactively and equitably, this tongue twister, engage people with lived experience. Presenters will highlight valuable learnings from their work, including providing a culturally appropriate living environment as part of establishing pathways to stable permanent housing and occupying leadership roles as lived experts within the homelessness sector. So I will let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. My name is Melissa Stone, and I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I am from an hour north of Brandon, which is called Ononol, Manitoba. That's where I grew up. And I work for the Mama Wichita Center. And we developed a few years ago a tiny home concept, and I'm just going to run through my PowerPoint. So our name is Astam Api Nikinak. We offered tobacco to one of our elders, and she smoked her pipe for 4 nights. And on her 3rd night, a dream came to her, or she dreamt of a man sitting on a tree, or sitting on the base of a tree, which is still at Astam Api Nikinak. And he said, Astam Api Nikinak, which means come sit at our home. And that was the name we were gifted. So Astam Api Nikinak, why did this program start? Under housing issues have had a long history in Winnipeg. In 2019, there were camps torn down in Winnipeg Center. And this launched a comprehensive community consultation that included community members, architects, and Indigenous community organizations to develop a strategy to address the under-housing crisis in the city. Our Indigenous programming, we do fishing and harvesting, hunting, gardening. We do one-on-one harm reduction support. We are comprehensive self-care supports with staff or individually. We also focus on the mental and the physical health care and wellness, as well as advocacy. So in 2022, this is only surveyed folks. There was 1,256 people surveyed that were living underhoused. 68.2% of those folks identified as Indigenous. 35.7% of the people interviewed were under the age of 30. So this led to our Indigenous tiny home transitional housing. We operate with some innovative models focusing on Indigenous-led and culturally empowered programs. We are harm reduction focused, and we try to be as minimal barrier as possible for folks to access anything at Nikinak. We follow the clan system, which was taught to us from our elders and our knowledge keepers. And then our lived experience, peer support, our lived experience folks actually led the entire project from our capital side to building the tiny homes to what needed to be in there to our programming, because they always know best, right? So they did everything and guided us. And then we used our community for building and supporting folks. So the importance of the models that we use, Indigenous-led programs, the harm reduction, strength-based, peer support, and low barrier to access. So creating a sense of belonging is essential for folks because the effects of colonization have had a significant effect on Indigenous people in various ways. By improving social determinants of health by creating a sense of community, creating independence and interdependence is so valuable to increasing capacity, connection to self and to culture. We also create space for folks to express themselves and their independence over their own environment. This is crucial in encouraging their independence, both mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually when they're on their wellness journey. This is what we offer. We have 22 affordable tiny homes. 4 of them are accessible units that are 400 square feet. We have 18 bachelor units that are 142 square feet. We have a single bed in there, a TV, a bathroom with a shower, a small kitchenette and a microwave with a mini fridge and a freezer, and 2 cooktops and a sink. We also have common areas that are a shared community kitchen, communal room, a medicine room, laundry facilities, and we have an outdoor sacred fire pit and a seating area. We are also getting a medical clinic with Dr. Barry Lavallee, and that's in the works right away. So we have a small clinic right in our lodge. So our program goals are to provide safe housing, community, and a sense of belonging for our underhoused relatives. We also recognize the importance and value of creating space for our relatives to have access to culturally significant ceremonies, supports, and programs, and this helps to empower individuals to find their inherent strengths and their identity. So this picture here, in Winnipeg, we have what is called Thunderbird House. So this is the Thunderbird House right here. We did have a small sweat lodge here, but it was burnt down. And so these are the tiny homes. So this is our main lodge, and then our tiny homes go in a circle with a fire pit in the middle. So we worked with elders and knowledge keepers as well, and Albert McLeod graciously gifted us a vision for Astama Pinikinak, where he asked that we try to bring back our folks' identity and family and community. And he designed this diagram for us so that we could work in a good way. So of course the north is the vision, the south is the pathway, and then we have our elders' teachings and our agency support, along with our peer support groups and our individual support, so like a buddy system. With our healing and values and respect and culture as part of our traditional circle, and then of course our community, our nation, ourself, and our family supporting. Our lived experience circle provided architectural design, programming ideas, and specialized consultation. Our Gikiwad Council, which was our elders and our knowledge keepers, also guided us on our build from ground zero up. Dr. Barry LaValle from Kim has been supporting us with MAPS program and harm reduction supplies, as well as a couple of doctors for in-house ability to see a doctor. And then we have staff-led peer support. So the staff are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We never close, and we're always there for the mental, the physical, emotional, and spiritual support, as well as self-compassion and self-care and encouragement, and of course, the advocacy. Our community partners. So the village is owned and operated by the Mama Wichita Center with a collective of partners from the Aboriginal Council of Winnipeg, Aboriginal Health and Wellness Center, the Circle of Life Thunderbird House, and Homelessness Winnipeg, and Dr. Barry LaValle from Kim. And this is us. But I just want to show you a short video. Can you help me? So we are a co-ed facility, and 3 of our men have offered to do a video. Please join.
Our home. Welcome to our home. My name is Warren Redhead. I go by a street named Tower. Before I came to this place, I was homeless. I was living in a camp. I started off the camp Tent City in front of the MMF there a couple years back. I had a landlord or whatever come see where I was living. He didn't think there was an actual Tent City or whatever. And he looked at me and he walked away and just kept on walking. He's like, no. And I went to go apply for the place and he said, no. I talked to some of the staff here, like peer counselors, I guess. They're peer counseling me. If I have something that on my shoulders or something, I'll go talk to one of them. Whoever I feel comfortable with that day, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
No, I didn't have that before.
Yeah. Wow.
You get more of security here, I guess. Like, you could keep your stuff here at nighttime or during the day with you want to have your own lock on your door.
Mm-hmm.
Could come and go.
I've been here since December last year. But its full name is Alan James Dorian. We just sit around sometimes at night and just chit chat or make a fire and just sit around the fire or sit on the benches and just talk. I never been around stuff like this. This was fun.
Yeah.
Doing native stuff.
Okay, well, my name is Jason. My birthday was just recently on the 16th, and I just turned 50. So I lived all over. I lived down in the States, Quebec, BC, Alberta. I was never at home. This is the closest I've been home since I was a teenager, since 18 when I left. My home is Sioux Valley, Dakota Nation. That's on the other side of Brandon. Like, I was staying at 190. That's another homeless shelter. It's not far from here. And I was staying there, but everything I owned got stolen from me there. So my first guitar got stolen, the one I came with. And there wasn't too much resource. Like, I think they just wanted us to stay homeless. That's how come they didn't have no programs, nothing for the homeless to better themselves. Right. It's quiet. There's more time for me to write songs and create songs. So that's what I'm trying to do, become an artist. Boys hung around her by the school, but she loves the boy next door, working at the candy store.
Hello. I'm a pacer, so I'm going to try and pace over here, but then I also have to go back and click my presentation. So, yeah, please. Oh, thank you. Okay, perfect. So my name's Christine, Christine Davies. My pronouns are she, her. And today we're going to chat a little bit about the importance of lived experience, which I know we've heard throughout the day. Lived experience in leadership within the housing sector, and how to provide leadership to people with lived experience. So what does that look like? It's fancy. So at the beginning of the presentation, I'm going to share just a little snippet of my lived experience. And as I'm sharing, I want you to kind of consciously think about the unintentional and intentional biases that you're forming as I'm speaking. So I have engaged in substance use from the age of 15. I've been involved in criminal activity, going in and out of the prison system from the age of 18 to 25, and I have a lengthy criminal record, and I received a 7-year sentence as my last charge. So now as we go through the presentation, think about the vulnerability that I may have experienced sharing this to a room full of strangers. The intention of this toolkit that I'm presenting on is to implement strategies to create a safer, more inclusive, and equitable space for people with lived experience. All right, so what is a toolkit? So a lived experience recruitment and retention toolkit. This is kind of just the index, so we'll go next. Perfect. So being a frontline worker, and I got into this line of work based solely off of my lived experience. I have a passion for working with folks on similar journeys, and I saw an increased need to incorporate a peer-led toolkit that organizations can draw from when going through the process of onboarding, retaining, and engaging people with lived experience. So the purpose of this toolkit is to create awareness, safety, proper protocols, and sustainability around not only hiring folks, but learning how to retain and support folks so people with lived experience are successful within organizations to move into leadership roles. So just a disclaimer, this is just a starter toolkit. This can be transformed and as you see fit for your organization. This question has come up before when I've worked in organizations, and it's been this big, how do we define a person with lived experience? We don't necessarily need to define somebody with lived experience. There's many circumstances to somebody having that lived expertise. So when we consider the human service sector and the purpose of perhaps adding into our job descriptions, that lived experience is considered an asset, we then narrow the type of lived experience we may be seeking or looking for based on the role and the population that we're serving. So for example, when we're working in the housing sector with vulnerable populations experiencing houselessness, substance use, mental health, domestic violence, intergenerational trauma, sex work, etc., that's when having an employee who can engage and relate would be a benefit to the folks that we serve. How do you assess your readiness to engage with folks with lived experience and the importance of having them within the housing sector? So we have recognized that it has been beneficial to have people with lived experience working in this sector and working with vulnerable populations. So people with lived experience, they bring the expertise and trauma wisdom to the folks that we serve. Building rapport with understanding, compassion, and empathy with the ability to connect on a more personal level. When we're dealing with the housing sector specifically and discussing how we can approach the housing crisis, having people with lived experience who can speak to their own experiences around houselessness will bring an advantage. So using real life experiences on what does and does not work can bring forth suggestions how to effectively implement policies and procedures. So in order to properly assess your readiness, you must ask yourself these questions. Do you have appropriate supports in place? Are you ready to explore and expand your recruitment and employee retention policies? Are you ready to accept that people with lived experience belong on boards, belong in decision-making meetings, belong in developing policy and procedure, and adopt the ideology around nothing about us without us. So are you willing to create safety for people with lived experience? Recognizing the experience we bring will also bring the possibility of having criminal records and a history where you'll need to have a clear and concise process when engaging in the onboarding process. Recruitment, this is like the meat and potatoes. It's my favorite part. So the recruitment starts at the job description. So when we've assessed our readiness and we are now making our job posting, we're going into that job description. When you develop your intention to highlight lived experience as an asset, you can start by having this outlined in the job description. Under the experience in education. Now you must be willing to consider lived expertise equivalent to education and a part of experience within the field. Asking for folks to submit a cover letter can give a safe space for people with lived experience to apply and submit a cover letter outlining what their experience is outside of societal norms, and how it aligns with the job description and the organization. Most times, this is where that lived experience will be disclosed. So when listing the requirements for the role, we recognize that asking for a criminal record in a child intervention check is common practice. Now, when you're asking for people with lived experience, I personally like an explanation. So you're asking for a criminal record check, you're asking for that child intervention check, but you're also letting folks know that the results will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, right? So that creates some safety. I personally have gotten a position, and after reviewing my criminal record check, I've been denied a position. So there's a lot of stigma around that. It does not feel good. And these are stigmas that people with lived experience face multiple times. When you're reviewing resumes and you get some applications in, my suggestion, it would be helpful to have a person with lived experience who has a different lens and an understanding around resume reviewing. So it may be a lot of times when we're reviewing resumes, we are going to see gaps in education. We can see gaps in education. We can see gaps in employment. I mean, I spent a large time in prison, so generally that wouldn't be disclosed unless given the opportunity to disclose that. So the interview process. So with the goal of successfully onboarding people with lived experience and having people with lived experience on the hiring panel, you can build your interview questions and having people with lived experience answering any questions that may come up for the employee as well. So divulging the expectations of the role and possible triggers that may arise. I worked in harm reduction. There was a lot of triggers. I saw my drug of choice. But luckily I had a mentor that was able to walk me through that and what that looked like. Again, we come into the criminal record check. So in the interview process at the end, you usually say, hey, can you submit a clear criminal record check? You can also give an opportunity, again, for the applicant to disclose, just saying like, hey, if there is any results, do you feel comfortable being able to disclose what may be on there? Let's have a conversation around it, right? What were the circumstances? Where are you at now? Things changed for me. I was in survival crime and on major substance use, right? So there obviously is still stigma around people with lived experience and having criminal records. If it's not done in a safe way, it can become very triggering. Like I kind of shared, I got denied a position. I actually signed the offer letter. I wasn't given an opportunity to provide like some detail. My criminal record is like 10 pages long. It can actually look not great, but given the opportunity to disclose and have a conversation around that, I think is creating a lot more safety for folks. The retention piece. Okay, we've successfully onboarded people with lived experience. How do we retain and engage folks to be supported within your organization to grow? Supervision. So being a lived experience leader myself in the housing sector, I have greatly benefited from having a supervisor who has also had lived experience or other people in leadership roles in an ideal world. We did the general performance discussions, but we also dived into a portion of the supervision where I was able to discuss and debrief on what I was going through. So I was having physical responses of being around crystal meth again. I didn't understand what was happening. I had panic attacks. But when I was able to disclose that and debrief with my manager, I recognized, okay, this is like my body having a response. This is how I'm going to get through it. This is how I got through it. So she was able to disclose, like, this is what I've done. So I found it really beneficial. In a matter of 3 months, working around people who use drugs just kind of became second nature. I was able to mentor and train new staff and just be like, hey, this is what I went through. I had a panic attack and I cried in the bathroom or whatever that might look like. So I think it would be beneficial to have a lived experience employee involved in the process, even if that means just reviewing the supervision documents and giving some feedback on what that might look like so it's progressive. Supervisions can be intimidating. So I'm really big on this. When you place an employee in a leadership role, it's very important that they have an understanding of that power dynamic that has been created. So as somebody with lived experience, I have a lot of trauma around authority figures. I have a mistrust in systems as I have gone through many of the systems, and I have also been mistreated by people in authority roles, whether that be police, prison guards, social workers, that's just to name a few. So creating that safety and then providing that progressive feedback is key in supervisions. It's important to understand and build that rapport with your employee and understand any triggers and preferred forms of communication. So I disclosed to my supervisor right at the beginning, I said, I don't know why, I've never been fired, but I always think I'm going to get fired if you call me into the office and you do not tell me what it is about. Constantly. So now, she'll, like my previous one, she would text me and she would say, hey, I need to talk to you. You are not getting fired, but I need to come chat with me. So like making a little bit of humor about it, but understanding like this is a trigger for me. So yeah, just taking time to understand like those trauma responses. Yeah, just being trauma informed as a leader. Oh, and I personally don't like the desk supervision. So like when you're sitting behind a desk, again, it's that power dynamic. So like having a circle, I've started with like smudges, depending on like what the employee prefers, but like removing any physical power dynamics is also really beneficial. Transparency. Okay. So transparency, I feel like as a leader is really important. Do what you say, mean what you say, or do what you do, mean what you say. Mean what you say what you mean? Yeah. Okay. If you have a problem with your employee, address it. I know for myself, if you're not direct and I don't understand what exactly I need to improve on, I can improve, right? So I feel like that transparency piece is really, really important. Again, building trust, for me, it takes time. So if I'm doing something and then you don't tell me and then I hear about it or I'm getting written up without like an opportunity to discuss, triggered. I'm triggered and that trust has been broken. What is authority trauma? I think we chatted about that already. Again, like I said, I have been mistreated by like prison guards, social workers, even just our roles in the housing sector and just having control and power over a basic need such as housing is a power dynamic. And if your employees don't have that understanding and you're not providing training that you are already in a position of power, again, they're going to have difficulty building trust, not only with people with lived experience, but also community members and other staff. One of my favorite types of supervisions is an Indigenous lens. We do a medicine wheel, so you can address all 4 quadrants. And then you could also, you can review the expectations. Please stop giving employees an evaluation to fill it on their own. Please, in the nicest way possible. It is awkward. So if I fill out an evaluation and my boss does not agree with what I've written, it's an awkward conversation, or vice versa. So if I have an employee, they fill out an evaluation, and then I'm like, well, actually, you're actually not really good at that. It's awkward. Just have a conversation. We really don't need to do the self-reflection. That's just my opinion in the nicest way possible. Focus on self-care. Burnout is real. Burnout is so real in this field. Role model self-care as a leader and focus on self-care and wellness. So whatever that looks like, find out what your employee's gig is and run with it, right? So I usually set self-care goals. So what's your goal for next week? What's your goal for next month? Okay, how are we gonna meet that together? This is my goal. Professional development. Training. I'm gonna do a quick little thing. Please participate. So how many people in this field have started a position with no training, you hit the ground running? Thank you. Please stop. Don't do that anymore. It's almost become like initiation okay, well, if they're gonna sink or swim, so it's like an initiation, if they swim, okay, they can make it, they're gonna stay with us, they're gonna survive. No, stop it. So it's our responsibility to invest in our employees. So if we have expectations of effective performance, it's our responsibility as leaders. Ask questions. Talk about learning styles, both from yourself and what the employee preferences are in regards to training. How do you learn? Do you like me to talk at you? Do you like hands-on? Do you like written? Do you want to sit in a room and read policies and procedures all day? Nobody does. But that's okay, it needs to happen, but how are you gonna learn them, right? Talk about triggers, normalize the fact that we're gonna get triggered. Something's gonna trigger us, that's okay. How are we gonna get through it together? And debrief, have an open door policy. If I don't feel like I can go to my supervisor to have a conversation, then I don't feel safe, right? So we gotta create safety. And of course, team building, again. Okay. Compensation. It's like the awkward topic, but we still have to talk about it. So this is a huge topic on equity and inclusion of people with lived experience. There's different opinions. So I'm not going to read all that, but essentially I started in this field with my lived experience. I did not go to school. I was in prison for 7 years. It's not an excuse, but it is what it is. But I had an itch to start working with folks that had gone through similar experiences, such as myself. So I started at the basic wage, frontline, whatever. I'm chilling. I got to a point where I started to get into more of like a mentorship, leadership role. That's awesome. But I didn't get considered for the position because I didn't meet the educational requirements. All right. I still ended up training and mentoring the person that did get hired into that role. I did find out they were making $10 more than me, but I was doing their job. And that happened for a couple of months. I advocated to get a site manager position in housing and harm reduction. I ended up getting the role. I got a little raise, so that's nice. But I was obviously doing payroll, and I was very familiar with what my staff were making. My team lead, who I oversaw, was making $6 more than me because she had a degree. It's awkward. We were also told by leadership that we weren't allowed to talk about what we made. So it's also very awkward because we're all going to talk about what we make. It's going to come up. Tell us not to do it. We're going to do it. It just creates unnecessary conflict between colleagues. So something that I loved that I have seen before is there was wage grids actually posted on the job description. So you know what you're signing up for. You know what to expect. I love that. I do still feel like it should be based off of performance, but you had an understanding around what you were going to make when you started, what you were going to make after 3 months, and then what you were going to make after 1 year. I love this concept. It's very inclusive. It's equitable. Everybody knows that you make the same as everybody, so it's not awkward. And compensation doesn't just mean money in the bank. It's the perks that are also included from employees. So having people with lived experience should have access to the same benefits, the same paid staff training, team building events. I have worked for an organization that paid very well but did not have any benefits. So I have children, and it was very difficult, right? I had no benefits. Tokenism. So if your organization is benefiting off a person with lived experience and them sharing their story, there should always be an honorarium offered and an agreed compensation. Okay. 3 minutes. All right. I think I'm all set. All right, how do I squeeze this in? Okay, so how do we foster lived experience leadership? So we've already talked about onboarding, retaining. Leadership doesn't just mean a leadership role or a management role. Something that I did previously at an organization is I created a lived experience community of practice. So the intent behind this was, one, to create a peer-led space of safety. So goals that we had was like onboarding peer support in general, bringing forth suggestions to HR, and becoming of the onboarding advisory panel. Again, discussing the outcomes and goals of the organization and nothing about us without us. This can be transformed into whatever works well for your organization with the support of upper leadership. And then we're transforming policy. People with lived experience are there. Like I said, it's more than just management and team leads. So lived experience folks can do training, right? Using that expertise around like harm reduction, substance use. I used to sit with new staff and be like, this is what meth looks like. This is a meth pipe. This is a crack pipe. And this is like how I acted when I was on meth. This is like signs to look out for overdoses. So there's more than just like management roles, tailoring people with lived experience to like train, mentor, and lead in your organization. How do we implement this? This tool needs to be remain peer-led, community of practice, building it within your organization and whatever that might look like, engaging in onboarding, policy reform, providing meaningful engagement with people with lived experience. It's an ever-evolving toolkit, and then truly adopting nothing about us without us. I'm going to reintroduce myself for closing. So my name is Christine, and my mother was a residential school survivor. I grew up around addiction, sexual abuse, and trauma. I went from experiencing houselessness for 10 years and using every substance I could get my hands on, with opiates and meth being my drug of choice. I have been off my drug of choice for over 10 years. I have 3 beautiful children. I got married and I bought my first home. And I'm blessed to be an Indigenous leader of an Indigenous-led supportive housing initiative in harm reduction housing. Thank you.
Lieutenant, okay. I misunderstood.
Can everyone hear me? No? Can everyone hear me? Yes. Hi there. Just quickly would introduce myself. I'm Alana Jones from Board and Place Inc.
I just don't know. Yeah, I'm not used to the mic thing, but I'm going to try my very best. I'm Keisha Scott. I'm with Alana Jones from Board and Place Inc., and I am the compliance officer and the author of the standards of practice and care.
Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about how we use the peer-based model or people with lived experience to support the leadership of the recovery and transformation of 60 Board in Place. Our quick agenda, we'll have the land acknowledgement, introduction, just a little bit about our project goals, then our model, and then looking at some of the barriers we experience as part of this transformation process.
Today I want to talk about that all land north, east, west, and south of us is Indigenous land. Board in Place, our research and work takes place on Treaty 13 and Dish with One Spoon territory. This Wampum Covenant is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. We humbly live and work here and aim to abide by this covenant to support Indigenous sovereignty and decolonize ourselves and our communities in solidarity with Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Keisha. Okay, I'm going to stand because this sitting is stressing me out.
Yep.
I'm not good with sitting and presenting. So one of the things that was really important in the work at 60 Borden was to recognize that we had a staff team that we were going to inherit. And I'm really proud because I said to my team, generally, when there's conferences like these, frontline staff don't get to attend. And I'm so happy that my entire team is here. They're all here to the back. Big feat for such a small organization of 9 months. Incredibly proud of that. Whenever we talked about the historical knowledge, just a little bit. So whenever there was things like what's happening in the building, we immediately thought, okay, Remington, right? Who's one of our staff. Everything knows about the building. When we talked about like resident engagement and life skills, like immediately, it's like, oh, Diana knows what's happening. Masha knows what's happening. Shaja knows what's happening. Aisha knows what's happening. When we talk about like the neighbors and the community, Shaja will be like, oh, this neighbor did this, or I'm sure this. So it was always around like, who was the frontline staff with lived experience that had that knowledge that can support the leadership of that particular thing. When we talked about building security, anything that moves at 60 Borden Remington knows, right? Anything that has an I, Deanna also knows. So again, and then when we talked about food and nutrition, it was Masha and now Shaji. So really just looking at the frontline staff within our team, what are the ways in which we can situate their leadership to move this transformation? Of course, even with obstacles, there are possibilities for great change, and I could tell you there was a lot of obstacles in being part of 60 Borden. A little bit about 60 Borden. I always say that as a nonprofit organization, we kind of got established out of necessity. The short story is that this building was due for closure in December 27, when everybody's thinking about Christmas. But nonetheless, the idea here was that staff needed to support vulnerable populations, and there was more support that was needed, and they didn't have the capacity to do so, right? So staff ratio. At the end of it, we went to the Housing Commission, submitted a recovery plan, and then subsequently a transformation plan, saying that okay, we'll step in and we'll form an organization to transform this building, but not just to support staff, but also to support the residents as well as the community. The community was relentless. The community is what brought, and when I say community here, I'm talking about our neighbors. Our neighbors is what kind of pushed us to be where we are. They're the ones that made a number of complaints to the municipal and licensing standards, to the powers that be, and so here we are, right? What was also important for us is that we were intentional about who we partnered with, and they were quite integral in our success. Part of that transformation is that we were asking for at least 18 months to see it through. Our primary goal was really to keep the doors open, right? Keisha will talk a lot about this, but when we took on 60 Borden, there were like 67 infractions. And I'm looking at Deanne and I'm thinking she would have this list and we're going through kind of checking it off. And then she'll make a tick at it. And then the fire marshal will be like, oh, by the way, that door is not closing properly, untick, right? So at the end of the day, our goal was just to keep the doors open. As I said, there's two things that really push this program. The first thing is that it's really important to share your vision and have intentional support. One of our key partners and stakeholders were the Toronto Bill Program Immigration Division. I shared what we were doing at 60 Borden, and they jumped on board and not just said, we want units. They understood that we wanted to improve the lives of residents, and we also wanted to improve the lives of the staff. So what does that look like? Paying rent, but also paying support dollars to ensure that staff had a decent wage. The neighborhood engagement was incredibly difficult, incredibly difficult. I would get the text, I would get the call at 2 a.m. Deanna would get the calls. Whoever phone number they had, they would get it. When we formalized and got emails, we all got the emails, right? Make this stop now, right? No good morning sometimes, make it stop now. Someone's loitering, someone's urinating. They were our biggest critic. Lots of conversations, lots of meetings, very, what I would say at times, yelling in emails to us, saying, make it happen. At the end of the day, I have to tell you, they held us accountable, but they also became one of our strongest supporters and allies. So it's taken a lot of hard conversations. It's taken a lot of biting of the tongue, having deep breaths. The team knows that. But here we are, and I'm happy to report that we've even gotten baked cookies from our neighbors. So we're on the right path. We're certainly on the right path. When it came to resident engagement and life skills, one of the things that really tripped me up when I started at Borden was that our team was responsible for cleaning rooms daily. They were responsible for doing laundry. They were responsible for meals, coffee on demand, and extra snacks. And I thought, we don't have enough staff to do all of that, right? But the staff did the work every single day with a smile, with great compassion. And so in staff meetings, and those staff meetings are not always easy either, right? Because so much is happening, so much change is happening. But I remember saying, I have a hard time with this laundry service that's happening here. Are there individuals that can do their laundry? And so we went down going through a list of who has the capacity to do the laundry. And if they don't have the capacity, certainly we'll continue to support. But furthermore, we started thinking about who can we partner with, right? So home care support services, they came in and did some assessment. And so we now had PSWs coming in to help with, activities of daily living and things like that. Of course, in talking with the residents, what did they want? More coffee, more snacks. And then I'd go to the staff and say, well, can you have the coffee break a little bit longer? It's like, Alana, when is it gonna end? But this is their home, and so much was happening around them, and so much they weren't aware of. But at the same time, they had no intention or desire to move from 60 Borden. This was their home. Some residents have been there for over 25 years, right? So preservation of this apartment building or this rooming house was really important to us. We tried our best to respond to their concerns. Safety was a big concern, people coming in and out of the building. And then this notion of sometimes we want to watch TV, and so the way how the room was set up, for example, the TV room, we couldn't always have it accessible. So then we figured out that we needed to do some repairs. The repairs are endless. We've come here to Nova Scotia and the bathrooms are being done. Like 3 bathrooms are all kind of falling apart. So, I mean, but at the end of the day, we wanted to encourage residents, and what I say to staff, their fine motor skills. So sometimes putting out the toaster so they could toast their bread, right? And I'm looking at Deanna, because Deanna always warm it up, and Shaja will warm up the bread. And I'm like, no, they're gonna have to put it in the toaster and toast it themselves. Just little things to make people start to dream, right? And then you hear people start talking about, I'm gonna come down to do my laundry now, right? Of course, there are some folks who would say, but that's your job, right? And we are uniquely positioned because we're responding to what shelter services is asking of us, rooming house is asking of us, and then public health, right? Which Keisha is going to talk about, because we're vulnerable populations, addictions, mental health, registration and license under personal care rooming house has its own framework, and then we're also responding to public health and to John Public. And I will say that one of the hardest things for us, and I think we might talk about that a little bit later, is that when all of this was happening at the spider table, so many organizations, over 26 organizations, had a lot to say about what to do with 60 Borden. I could tell you only 4 of those organizations actually continued on with us to really make a difference, right? And so I want to say to the social activists, passionate activists, when you put your hand up and say, shut this place down, be prepared to do the work as it relates to displacement. If you're not prepared to do that, keep your hands in your pocket. It will keep warm, right? Even on a really hot day, okay? And this is where I pass it over to Keisha.
I'm gonna stand up. All right. Hi. So I saw somebody familiar, so I'm smiling even bigger. So hi, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, we're talking about food, nutrition, and collaboration. And the thing that I wanted to talk about first, to pick up from where Alana was mentioning, was about, the different organizations that were very much against the house staying open, and essentially 33 people being on the street or in other homes that weren't so much their home as this place has been. But some of the best work that we've done, that I've seen happen at Borden, has been about the food security. I've worked in other places where, it's always kind of a scramble to get food through Second Harvest and other local donation supports. But at Borden, we are proud to say that we have a lot of food coming in, to the point where we do the work that I think is missing oftentimes in the sector generally. So we all work at different organizations, but I wonder how many times we come together to support other organizations. So if you're familiar with that road of support around food, oftentimes you're on list to get this donation. If you don't pick it up, you put the organization at risk of not being able to get that again. So what we do is we get it, even though we don't necessarily need all of it, and we make sure we spread the wealth. We share that with other organizations that are in need. We're at 30 people living at Borden, but then there's a place not far from us that within a day, 600 people go in and out of there. And all the bread that we get from this one bakery, along with pastries, things that are hard to access, are taken. So that's some of the proudest work that I see that we've done, along with this recovering transpiration. Also, another thing that we try to accommodate is that people are living at Borden with different health needs, different dietary restrictions around religion, around things that they're even able to eat because of medication that they may be taking. It's a very carb craving type of diet that you want. But we still have a responsibility to provide nutrition within that. So we have creative ways, blending things into sauces, things like that. You know, and I think a lot of us can admit that we like carbs, right? Regardless of how good or bad they are for us. So I'm just gonna fix. Okay, so this, you know, originally when I would look at these things, building security and facilities management, I wasn't so interested, you know, we know what generally it is. For those of you that don't know what Toronto Public Health is, it's our municipal body that is responsible to the public spaces and health matters, prevention of disease and transmission, things like this, making sure you have safe management of your food and other health concerns within different places. So restaurants, we have the pass system. Is anyone familiar with that here? Okay, I think everyone generally understands hand washing stations, things like this. But they're also responsible for what we call any living spaces that are for public or, you know, what would be rooming houses in case of Borden or other supportive housing structures, healthcare centers. How are you handling the food? Are you making sure that there are things to prevent pests, bed bugs, cockroaches, mice, rats? For Toronto, a lot of people would say rats are our most popular pest because we're the rattiest city in this country. But there's that. There's Toronto Fire. And it reminds me every time I go into a building, when we say Toronto Fire, that we so often are not aware of all the invisible workers that come in and out of a building every day to make sure that we have the space, from the cleaners to the people that install these systems and check them all the time. So making sure that, you know, life and liability, that those things are taken care of. And then we have municipal licensing and standards, and they are responsible for all the things like your building codes. Are there cracks in your ceiling, your windows? Are there gaps in your walls that make it dangerous for people to live there? That are basically, you know, building standards. Alana mentioned that we had, was it 67? I keep thinking it was 68 infractions. It did mean that those things stood in the way of us going ahead to be able to be keeping Borden open. That was one of the biggest challenges. It meant that the housing commissioner who was involved, and the best way to describe the housing commissioner was that she's kind of the, how do we say that's the gatekeeper. Yeah, she is the gatekeeper for anything that has to do with social housing, vulnerable populations, and then of course what we call the neighbors, but essentially are property owners and taxpayers. So she was very compassionate, she was very understanding, but nevertheless she allowed us to have 18 months to put things together. And it was with the understanding that these things had to be met. It meant that all of the inspections for Toronto Public Health had to come out with a pass. It meant that the same thing for the Toronto Fire, as well as municipal licensing and standard. No more broken windows, no more obvious holes in the walls. All the heaters had to be working appropriately or replaced. As much as you can imagine or think of, all those things had to be corrected in order to keep this place open. Okay. I think you did. Yeah, I think you did. You're fine. You're fine.
So we feel like we've missed one. So just to quickly wrap up, there are some lovely things that happened, but there were a lot of barriers, as you can imagine. The stigma of homelessness, right? Like at times we felt like, and I'm just remembering one day, I'm falling back to Deanna because Deanna is our program supervisor, and she'd be like, why can't they just say, come offer some soup? They're only complaining, right? Because the neighbors would be so hard. And so it's like, sometimes we felt like people didn't understand what individuals, because most of the folks coming, or I would say all, coming from into Borden Place was coming from homelessness, coming either from detention center, being discharged from CAMH, like long history of homelessness. So that stigma really created a barrier. Then staff morale, it's like all these things happening, right? Like, what is my job security? Those things create a bit of a challenge. It's like norming and forming. Don't say that. I don't feel this way. Where is this going? Like, it's hard. There's the history of the building. You Google Borden, and there it is. And there is a petition of 200 and something neighbors. 400. It's now 400, right? At that time, a year ago. So you can imagine, right? I'm just like, I wish I really knew computers well so I could erase that and we have a fresh start. But technology is not me. But that history is there. The stigma of mental health, right? Again, continues to be a challenge. Do people really understand what it means, right? I remember one client saying, well, you know, Alana, I just wish we could get a little bit more love. I'm just like, a little bit more love? So what that could it be? Oh, a little hug sometimes. And I'm thinking to myself, risk of bed bugs, Alana, but maybe you should. But they have feelings too, right? Like they haven't been touched, they haven't been hugged, they haven't been in contact with their families. And that's something we're also encouraging. I remember just staff talking about it's so hard to hear people complain and then not see the family show up. And that's always heartbreaking. Just the lack of support from community agencies created a barrier for us, right? Again, it's like, oh, you could do this, you're a small organization. And yes, we don't want to talk about the elephant in the room, but I remember someone saying, this is a small Black organization, right? My entire team is marginalized. What does that look like? What does that, like, how do we navigate the system? It's not very easy. The same players I worked with for the last 22 years, their conversation with me looks and feels very different. And so you kind of have to keep going on. And so this is why I say, be intentional with the organizations you partner with, because the BAIL program understood our vision, right? We met, we visited their location, and they weren't just interested in like, oh, we're gonna place our clients there. They were interested, let me meet the staff, right? That's also something that was really nice with the neighbors too, right? We became intentional about who we're going to partner with. And there's often a lot of pushback, even when we talk about like the security of the building. Sometimes they'll come in and we're like, okay, you have to sign in, we're trying to standardize. They'll look at you up and down, right? And again, it's like, you're not worthy, you don't have the ability to make a change within this organization that's trying to make a difference in the lives of community, okay? And again, some of our major accomplishments, and I'm saying the BAIL program because of the level of support that we have received, we've been able to be here today. Like, that's a big part of it. The deficiencies have all been corrected, and our staff have a decent wage. Absolutely, I want to pay people more. And then our community neighbors have become our biggest supporters. One thing I want to say is that we're doing all this work and we don't have any funding dollar. We don't have a single funding dollar. Are we proud? We're incredibly proud of the work that we're doing. Incredibly proud. We do have handouts, by the way. I forgot. I just wanted to let people know that we do have handouts to the front. If you want to see our 13 tabs of accomplishments.
Cool.
So I'll leave it on the front here.
I also have cards if anybody wants my contact.
So let's give all of them a big hand. Yeah, just really, really powerful. I always feel kinship with people that are working in this role, so thank you. So now we're going to have time for questions, and then I'll just get you to run around with the mic.
Put your hand up and I'll get to you as quickly as I can.
Yeah. Oh, it's fastest. I had a question for Christine. Okay. Sorry, I wanted to know, you kind of trailed off in your presentation around, because it was coming to an end, about if you were having people come in and talk about their lived experiences, for example, as a drug user or what have you, right? Or maybe criminalized experience, and you started to talk about what you can do to do that appropriately, right? You started saying things about an honorarium. I wondered if there was anything more that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, so when I was talking about that, so I have worked for organizations where I have been asked to personally share like my lived experience or my story, and maybe it was at like a press conference or an event. And previously, I have disclosed my story, but as an employee of the organization, there was no honorarium or anything offered. So usually when you're asking somebody with lived experience, maybe a conversation comes up and, you say, hey, listen, you know what, we're going to have a conference, or we're going to have, we have this event. Would you feel comfortable in disclosing, like sharing your story? It's a success story. When we're asking people to do interviews, when we're asking people, hey, this community member got housed and this is a success story. When we're asking folks, to disclose like that success story in our minds, but really it's their personal lives and their stories, we should always be offering an honorarium. So what that looks like can differ between the organizations, but essentially you're just saying like, hey, I value you and I value your time. I want to share a video of you on the screen, or, I want you to speak openly, or, I'm going to talk and share your name. Would you feel comfortable with that? We should always say, but in that, I want to offer you and I want to gift you whatever that looks like. It could look like gift cards. It can look like compensation. It depends on obviously the funding and where that's coming from. So I've seen gift cards. I've seen baskets of like goodies. So it just really depends on like preference of that person and what is available for resources with your organization. But I think you're just saying like, I honor you and I honor your story and who you are, and that's your life. And so that's what an honorarium kind of means. It's just like providing that.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
Okay. I was just wondering, in terms of when talking about Borden, for example, how much freedom the residents actually have. Because I know with a lot of places like that, they say, you have to be in by 8 o'clock or we're going to lock you out. Like, yeah, you're not allowed to do drugs. When, they have an addiction, harm reduction is a thing. And a lot of people, because they are substance users, get kicked out of the one place they could probably get help. So I was just asking, like, if somebody comes to Borden or a place like that, how much freedom do they have, or is there rules they have to follow beyond the basic, don't be a dick?
Thanks, Victoria, for your question. So everyone is given a key for the front door and for their room when they sign their lease with Borden. So we don't have a curfew. Neighbors have asked us around that piece. What we do have is to ask folks to be quiet after 11 in the patio. The patio has been a place of great contention. We are a harm reduction location. We don't want people to be smoking in their rooms because of the fire hazard and things like that. Of course, we provide people with support around using safely and all of that. But I have to tell you, it's the strangest things. These fire lamps sometimes don't go off even when people are sitting. And then the fire guy tests it and says, oh, it's working. But then when they're smoking in their rooms, it never goes off. I swear, it's crazy. But I mean, to answer your question simply, we don't have rigid rules that would displace people. It's really trying to work with people where they're at. Yeah.
I have a question for Keisha and the staff at Borden Place. My name is Krista. I work for South Shore Open Doors Association. I am the intensive case manager there, and I've been tasked with managing the winter shelter that is a pilot for our community. Just wondering how long it took you to build that rapport with your community neighbors, because right now the whole not in my backyard situation that we're seeing in Bridgewater is actually shocking. We didn't think it would be that bad, but we have a whole community of neighbors who are mad that they weren't included in the decision making, that we didn't even make the decisions. So we're just trying to figure out how to go forward with these neighbors and how to build that rapport with them and hopefully have them become some of our biggest supporters in the future as well.
This is a question that's probably best placed with Alana. What I can start off by saying is that, first of all, one of the things that the neighbors had that was unique, unlike other NIMBY movements that we know about, is that they actually did have a core interest in seeing the best for the residents there of Borden Place. And also, I think they were in this situation where they weren't being heard for many, many years, and they were watching the house deteriorate, but they still had that core desire to see the success of Borden, but more specifically, see the success or the well-being of the residents there. Not everyone was great, we could say that for sure, but I think that one of the things that worked best with how things were worked out, as Alana mentioned, that there was a lot of contact that they were allowed to have with the staff or with Alana. Not when I say the staff, I should say Alana, Deanna in particular, because there was a need to protect the rest of the staff from kind of a general onslaught, just like there's a need to protect the residents as individuals that have the right to be in their homes. So there was, I would say, we kind of approached it where Alana is definitely the good guy and I was a little bit more of the not so good guy, because there were times there were things that were what I would call boundary pushing. Can we come into the house and see what you're doing? What are the details of the rules in the house? That's not actually your business, right? So things like that, but saying it, of course, in a more delicate fashion. Alana, did you want to add to that?
Yeah. One of the things I strongly believe in is that there is power in collaboration. And because we are intent on transforming 60 Borden into supportive housing, we're not going to move that building anywhere. And so our neighbors are our allies and our biggest supports. They're also our ears on the ground, because if clients are in crisis, they will let us know. Mm-hmm. But you have to make yourself available and be prepared, is what I will encourage. And I'm happy to exchange numbers with you. Just be prepared to hear the harsh criticism. Be prepared to get the text to say, this happened, check your camera. This happened, can you come now? Can you remove these cigarette butts? Like, this is their home too, right? And so I've gone with the broom. I do it. You create a presence, right? You create a presence because they're also creating a presence as well. And that's really, really important. In many ways, I actually did not foresee us getting to this place so quickly. We anticipated, when I was putting that together, we anticipated 18 months, we'll figure things out with the neighbors. We're 9 months in, and it's because we've remained responsive to their needs, and they're also seeing the community, meaning the residents who live at 60 Borden, their lives are improving, right? Like, they've asked to meet with our staff as well. So you have to find ways. There's actually a booklet I received that I can share with you about how to negotiate and build community with your neighbors. I can share that with you as well. Really, really important and critical. But be prepared to listen. They'll be harsh. It's okay. Take a walk. Walk around the neighborhood. I also do a lot of that. Walking around the neighborhood, saying hello, just different ways of engaging. Yeah.
I have a question for Christine. So when you're you're building the toolkit, and me being a lived experience person, and saying, like, I just kind of want to play off what she was saying, for when we're sharing our stories, because we're a very vulnerable population and we're trying to be in management and stuff, and we feel like we're always being judged. So do you feel like that toolkit is something when you're saying going into organizations, staying like, when you do ask us to share our story, you're asking us to be vulnerable? And so having that and saying you're in a safe space, because sometimes people do get judged and they go out and they say things, oh, she was an ex-addict. So we're already giving our time. So is that what you're trying to say when you're saying like an honorarium and saying that you're safe? Make us feel safe so that we don't feel like we're being used?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like having the toolkit and implementing strategies prior to even engaging, or when you're engaging with folks with lived experience, you already have that rapport. So you're already able to kind of create like that safe space. And then additional to, like, for me, when I'm working in an organization and I'm like going to a conference and I'm just going for whatever, okay, cool, I'm an employee. But then when we're taking a step forward and we're sharing like that lived experience, or we're sharing our journeys or anything like that, that's outside of my scope, and that's outside of like who I am as an employee, but that's like my personal story. So then that's when you would, did it turn off? Hello. Oh, that's when you would then discuss like that further. But I definitely think like the toolkit is like that initial piece that organizations, like creating that safety and inclusivity and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like for organizations, like you would go out and consult and like almost educate them on working with people with lived experience. Because we do have all that trauma. So going out there and kind of teaching them how to work with people with lived experience. Cool. Thank you.
That's what my card is for. It's a lived experience consultant card. Thank you.
I think you just answered my question with that card comment. But I was just wondering if that lived experience toolkit, hiring and retention and all that, is something that we can purchase, or is that something that is like is available to employers?
Yeah, absolutely. Please take my card and thank you.
This question is also for Christine. One of the issues that we've had working in the Northwest Territories with Indigenous peoples who've experienced homelessness is, after creating a safe space, we've had, in government specifically, a huge ethical issue with putting the onus of self-determination on them, because in empowering Indigenous peoples with lived expertise to be involved in the process, we've somehow shifted all of that responsibility on solving this problem that we've created onto them. So I'm wondering how we could use this toolkit to kind of address that issue, because at this point the territories kind of just left it on them, and that isn't exactly something that we can sit with, because it is a problem that was created by like the housing corporation. So
yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's actually interesting. I went to a session this morning, but I definitely feel like the purpose of having, I guess, setting the intention on the purpose of having like folks with lived experience. So although folks with lived experience are there, we've seen like the benefit of having that lived expertise for folks that we serve. But I personally feel like there should be like consultations. There should be like kind of like some of the previous ones. There's like consultations, and people with lived experience are like making suggestions. But ultimately, like it's policy developers and City of Edmonton and all of that. It's ultimately like still their responsibility. So I would still have like that encouragement piece of like still having lived experience, like maybe community practice or lived experience like circle, where it's still an advisory panel, but throwing the expectations still back on like the policy reform, like policy makers and everything like that, right? So it's still like, okay, City of Edmonton or City of wherever you're from, like it's still their responsibility to implement those policies and those changes. Lived experience can advise, and but ultimately, like we're not the ones. Well, unless we're in those positions, we're ultimately not the ones making like those big decisions. I mean, sure, in an ideal world, we would be a part of that process. But I think just like, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I feel like pushing back on that and saying like, there's a boundary, right? There's a boundary of folks with lived experience, and this is like our scope, and this is our expertise. This is your scope, and this is like what you're responsible for, and pushing back. And I think if you create that safety and that expectation when you're doing those consultations, I feel like with that boundary in place, you're putting the onus back on the people that are actually going to be changing systems. I don't know if that kind of answers it. Okay.
Anyone else? Questions? Any other questions? No? Okay. I don't know what happened to the moderator, but thank you guys all. Great presentation. I loved it. Thank you.